All right. Don't know what that is. It's quite cool, actually. Let's see. It's like the full spectrum of white light. Anyway, so in this video I wanted to address something that I've not directly talked about, I don't think. I mean, I mention a version of this in every video, but it can be hard to get across, and that's that what I'm pointing to, although I'm using concepts, although I'm using language to communicate this, to try and the effect of that is to try and point whoever's listening more deeply into their own direct experience. But what I'm talking about in terms of awakening isn't conceptual. It is nothing to do with concept. So there are a lot of people who are describing kind of conceptual models to me in the comments, and like these models are as accurate as concepts can be. I mean, none of them are way off or anything like that. They all conceptually make sense. They're all well constructed conceptual models. But I would just caution everyone that at the end of the day, this isn't about concepts. Having a solid conceptual grasp of this doesn't do any good. It doesn't, in terms of the insight, in terms of the realization, the realization itself is transcendent of all those concepts. The concepts can't touch it. It's out with the conceptual space. So that was the point in the last video. The inquiry is to point the so to speak direction of attention back towards the felt sense of the one that's doing this, the one that's trying to understand this. That kind of vantage point, that position from which we understand things conceptually, from which we are aware of the thought in which these conceptual models can be constructed, and we relate to that, we refer to that to kind of give us a grasp of reality, to give us an orientation in life, in mind. So the point of that is to investigate the subject, investigate the one here that's aware of all this. Not the object of knowing, the object of knowing, i.e. thoughts, but looking back at the one that knows, and then looking, is there a separation there? Investigating the nature of knowingness itself. Is there a subject in that? Is there an object in that, in thought? So can I find a distinction between me, the thinker, the subject, and the thought, the objective thought, the object of knowing? Can I actually find a distinction there? Is that subjective me something that actually exists in experience? I was talking to someone and I mentioned something about trying to make a distinction between the direct experience of thought and the conceptual content of thought. What the thought's saying, what the thought's suggesting in terms of that, the content of it, in comparison to the direct experience of thought as it appears now immediately. That's the thing here, right? That's the that's when the attachment to concepts will kind of break apart a wee bit. And a good way to do that is to there are lots of different ways that we can look at the thought experience rather than being carried away with the concept. Because no matter how many times you hear this isn't a concept, that automatic position of the subject, it'll just assume that position, and then we are putting the value in the concept again. It comes through the back door, so to speak. It's like automatic. To break that momentum, we can do things like I said, where is the me, the thinker? Look for that me. Can I find it? Can I find it separate from the thought? Can I observe it objectively? So investigating the sense of the one that is aware of my experience, or this experience. You could even like look for a distinction or a division between one thought and the next, or a distinction or a division between thought and thoughtlessness. Really closely looking at thought experience. When we do that, there's a difference in the quality of experience, or the difference in the quality of attention. We're looking at the immediate experience of thought rather than investing importance and belief in what the thought is saying. So these conceptual models that we describe, like, I'll speak for myself. So I did this because having a conceptual model, right? So the concepts are of high importance. It's like the only lens through which the person can experience reality, because the person itself is a concept, the person itself is a thought. So it can only view reality through its own lens, by its own rules. What we're doing here is we are almost like expanding out with that position, expanding out with the limitation of thought and conceptuality. So for myself, I did this because it was like a well-known and habitually comfortable means of understanding what was going on here. And it was scary to let go of that, because throughout our whole life, living as a person, we use our mind, we use thought and our conceptual understanding to orient us, to control, to feel like we're secure, to feel like we know what's going on, we know what's going to happen, etc., etc. What we're doing with awakening is we are investigating the illusion that makes it look like that's necessary, that makes it look like that's what this is, and it really feels like that. Because it's wrapped up with emotional experience and identity, it can be quite scary to let go of that. So I know that's why a lot of the people that I talk to almost aren't quite ready to see past the conceptual side of this. And the thing that the flaw about myself, and there are limitations and flaws to talking about this anyway, but specifically for any of my subscribers, right, the flaw with me is that personality wise, right, I've always been the type of person that is like logically minded, very language oriented, and very heavily leaning on the conceptual side of things, which is why it was difficult for me to let go of that. And you can even see the manifestation of those tendencies in this channel, right? So those tendencies, those personality traits are still rolling on in this form. But the difference here is that with awakening, these concepts are being used as a tool for a function, right? To point to direct experience. So for as many people that say to me, I've never heard it explained that way before. This is a really good way of explaining it, and that's thanks to this conceptual tendency in this individual. But equally, the downside to that is that, for people who are similar to myself, there'll be like an affinity there for the conceptual side of this, and the way I'm talking, it will like ramp up the conceptual mind to the point where it obscures the actual message. So it's very important to be aware of that. So from that position, it's going to look like there's a guy here spewing out tons of concepts, and it's going to look that this guy here conceptually has an advanced understanding of what I'm talking about. It sounds ridiculous, but that's not the case. It's just not the case. That's why, like, almost 200 videos I've done, probably every other one I've mentioned a version of this. I keep saying it, it's important. This isn't a conceptual understanding. This is, you could say, pre-conceptual, or this is transcendent of concepts. We're looking at the knowingness, the awareness, the consciousness that in which those concepts appear, that allows those concepts to be known by this. And we're breaking out with the limitations of that conceptual understanding. And the concepts are always missing something when we believe them, and we can feel it. Until we get in touch with an aspect of ourselves, or it's not even an aspect, it's like the nature of ourselves that is pre-conceptual, is beyond concept, isn't dependent on concept whatsoever. In fact, you could say, if you could say anything, concepts are dependent on it. But, right, this is the key. The key to this is the sense of the one that's doing all this, that's thinking about this, that's trying to explain this. That subjective position in mind, in thought, the position of the thinker, the assumption of the thinker, until that falls, there's always going to be some sort of real belief in the tendencies, a tendency to believe in the concepts. Because there's a sense of the one that believes it. There's a sense of the one that feels like it has to increase its conceptual understanding of this in order to grasp it or control it. It's an active thing. It's a trying to control thing. It's trying to take a position and comprehend something from a subjective point of view. That's the kind of feel of it. And letting go of that, it's not like the letting go happens from that subjective position. Like, the function just becomes clear, and then it lets go of itself. It no longer has the power. But with inquiry and doing this, when we start to disrupt that function by looking back at the sense of the one that knows, the sense of the experiencer here, we're looking directly at the source of identity as it's suggested in thought. What tends to happen is the objective thoughts ramp up, and it'll use things to distract, and it'll use thoughts and stuff charged with emotion to distract, to continually and automatically, habitually look past that, the position that is looking from. It's something very simple. It's something very simple, and you need to kind of get the feel for it. And it's not a psychological understanding, it's a felt thing. So I can describe it like this, the difference. So, talking about emotion, so let's say, what's an intense emotion? Let's go with joy, right? So how many words would you have to use to describe the emotion of joy? And is the emotion of joy a fixed thing? Every time you've felt it, has it been slightly different, or has it had different qualities, or different physical sensation if you're in touch with that. So you can use a bunch of concepts and conceptual models to or poem to my wife makes fun of me with it for the way I say that, to describe it. So there's the concept that refers to it, that points to the feeling of joy, but that concept's only there for us to share a conceptual understanding so that we know what we're talking about, i.e. joy. The actual direct experience, the sensation, the felt reality of that emotion of joy, could you ever fully put it into words? So what we're talking about here, same with pain, even like a physical sensation, pain. You know, pain refers to a physical sensation, right? But under that bracket of pain, the whole spectrum and nuance in that, and possibilities in that, is vast. Pain is just a designation, it's just a label, it's a concept. We know it refers to something in experience, but it in no way fully represents the experience. The experience itself is something different. That's exactly what I'm talking about here with awakening. So I'm using these concepts to point to your experience. And it's something that, see with the people that I talk to that wake up and then they try and explain it to me using concepts, and I've explained it to them and so on, but then when there's the awakening, there's that recognition, and then we both know that, you know, now we know what we're talking about. Now we know what that all the language referred to, and it has nothing to do with the language. So I need to be careful what I'm saying as well, because people will, because so much of identity is wrapped up in this, and there's fear there. There's fear of the unknown and letting go of the concepts that we use to orient us in life. Sometimes when I point at that, people might react in a way where they might perceive it as being threatening, so they'll really hold on to the concept. It might even be the last thing that's preventing this recognition, this realization. So I put it like this. So, like in the comments, right? So whenever you listen to one of these videos, right, and you're inclined to comment, and I like it when people comment, and I like responding to the comments and interacting with people. So I'm not saying don't comment, but when you're inclined to comment, just stop for a minute and think, where is this coming from? Is the question going to be useful for me in terms of inquiry, or is it just going to introduce more complicated concepts? So I would much rather hear a like self-report, like a description of experience. I'd much rather hear about your experience than tell you something about my experience, or give you a conceptual model about what awakening is or what it's like. So this is all about looking into your experience, and what I'm using here in language is just a tool, which can be effective, but it has massive flaws. It has massive flaws. I think that's the whole idea behind Zen, isn't it? It's like, it's almost like the opposite of what this channel is. So this is meant to point you deeper and deeper into a felt intuitive understanding about what you are. And there's like an energetic signature to this mind-based understanding, and that it doesn't feel complete. It's missing something. It's confusing. It's always looking for, it's always looking for the next thing, and then, what about this? The realization I'm pointing to is self-confirming. It's obvious. It doesn't need an explanation. It's so complete that there's no and then. It's a complete stopping. And then we're going more directly and more deeply into that, what's realized, which by the way is already here. It's already here. So if there's a movement there in mind, so say you do the inquiry, so you stop for a minute, you notice I'm thinking. So rather than being totally identified in the thought narrative to the point where it's just rolling on habitually and you don't even know you're thinking, really, you could say is like the mind identified state. Suddenly you notice that you're thinking, and you're like, oh, I'm lost in thought, or I was lost in thought. Everyone that's watching this, right, is gonna be familiar with that experience, I'm pretty sure. So that is the awakening. That's the awakening. So once we're aware that there's something in this experience, there's an identification with thought and it's uncomfortable. And we notice that in the moment and we kind of come out of it a little bit and we're like, oh, I'm lost in thought. That's the beginning of this awakening. That's like maybe you could say the first movement. But the whole thing happens in that space. So you come out of thought, you recognize that, and then there's the opportunity to get in touch with the direct experience of thought. So we're no longer wrapped up in the content of thought and rolling on thoughts, habitual thoughts, reflecting thoughts. There's a stopping there. There's a kind of, it feels like a kind of stepping back or expanding out of that boxed in, blinkered thought narrative. So then we have the opportunity there to use that space to become aware of the direct experience of thought. So then we can ask something like inquiry, like, what is it that's me that was lost in thought? What is it that's me that is thinking? What am I that's aware of the thought? Something like that. So then we're not looking out objectively at thought and letting that run the show. We're looking back at the sense of the one as the thinker. Don't even know where was I going with this? I can't even remember. So then you might get lost in thought again, and then you recognize, oh, I'm lost in thought again, I was away with it there. And then again you stop. You look directly at the thought experience. You might, rather than try and distance yourself from thought, that's holding this subjective position and then trying to hold the thought at a distance from what you feel like you are. You then get closer to the thought experience. You could maybe make the thought space as big as possible, and then you can investigate, what is it that's me that's here that feels like it's looking at thought or listening to thought? Is there a real subject here? Is there a real separate me here that's in control or observing this thought experience? These things don't have answers, right? But the value is in looking. We're looking at these assumptions, and the assumption is here that I am the thinker. I am subject to my thought experience. all of the thoughts relate back to me, the separate self. They refer back to me, the separate self. All we're doing is questioning that function. So you see, it's so fundamental, it's so simple. It doesn't matter what the thoughts are saying. We're investigating the nature of the thought experience, the thought function, and the felt sense of me. Because it feels real. It really feels like I need to understand or investigate or ponder concepts to wake up. Until it becomes clear that sense of the separate me that needs to do that is itself a concept, is itself but a transient thought experience that's not here all the time. And then what you are that is here all the time in a timeless way becomes self-evidently clear to itself. Everyone's going to describe that in a slightly different way. So if you read the comments, right, if you read the comments from people who would describe themselves or are describing having this shift, so they're saying, I had this awakening, I know what you're talking about. Look at the way that they talk about it. Look how they're describing it. There might be some concept mixed in there, and it'll be like something like the conceptual version of this will be like, it's like this, or this is how it is, or I've learned it's like this, or asking me, is this what you mean? Is it like this? But there'll be like a description of their experience, and somewhere in the description of that experience is exactly what I'm always pointing to, but it's nothing to do with the description. So it's like them trying to describe to us, everyone that's reading the comments, what it's like to experience anger or what it's like to experience joy. We all know that anger and joy is an emotion. It's like a direct experience that you feel. It's not something that you have to think about to experience. It's not something that you can capture in words, if that makes any sense. So whenever we're doing this and I'm describing this and you're following along type thing, there might be like an intuitive sense of this and you can feel it. It starts to become quite clear in your experience in a way. It might seem elusive. It only seems elusive from the point of view of the mind that wants to understand it, to grab onto it. Use that feeling, use that intuitive sense to carry it on, and then just watch for the mind coming in to frame it in a way, or say something like, oh, it's not here anymore, I lost it, or anything. You don't have to believe any of it. It's not about belief, it's not about understanding. So this time, what we could do is, you could, in the comments, if anyone's leaving a comment, might not, describe your experience with inquiry, specific to you, what it feels like, what you notice, in the most direct way that you can. Sometimes even describing this can help clarify it. So what happens, what does it feel like when you inquire back towards the one? What is your experience? What do the thoughts come up and say that makes it seem like, I am a separate self, I am not awake? And I think that'll be like a more directed approach, like collectively. Anyway, I think that'll do for now, and I'll talk to you next time.